One. Hello, everyone. Good evening, good morning, whatever time it is for you right now. I am not Craig Bachmann. I am, in fact, Cale Royer from TreeStuff.com. Craig will be here in just a minute, but first, I get to talk. This is my time. So, a couple things that I want to let everybody know about. One, we have a new weekly live broadcast and podcast that we're doing. If you can watch, it is live Mondays at noon Eastern Time. And it's whatever guest we have. Sometimes we don't have a guest, and it's just Nick and I chatting about the arboriculture industry and maybe giving away some stuff and some things that are new around here. And also, most importantly, talking with our guests, of which Craig was one of our most recent guests. So please check that out. If you can't watch that live on Facebook and YouTube on Wednesday, completely understand. You can listen to it on any podcast app after that. There may be different ways if you listen to the podcast or watch the live broadcast that you can win things. You'll have to check it out to find out. Couple other things that we're doing. One, Top and Drop is about to start up, so this is still kind of our like super secret initiation. treestuff.com/top-and-drop will take you to a secret web page that will give you a single item each week that is highly discounted with a special coupon code on that. So check that out, but don't tell anybody about it because it's super secret right now. Top and Drop. The other thing is that the notch hookups are finally here. It is the best way to integrate Sena Bluetooth communications into your helmets, and they're great. They're fantastic. They've been working on them for a very long time, and we really like them. There's a new video that we have out on YouTube now on what makes them so interesting, and why and how quickly you can install them. So please go ahead and check that out. So without much further ado, I've got Craig Bachmann. He's going to talk about Never Waste a Crisis, something that he kind of mentioned in our live broadcast last time. Craig is a master arborist, owner-operator of Tree 133 Professional Arborists. He is a Tree U instructor as well, and so just fantastic guy. So please take notes. There will be a CEU quiz linked at the end of the webinar that you can take to get free ISA CEUs, only if you pass though, so take notes. And also ask questions, please. We have him here. He's live. He's a font of knowledge. So put your questions in the comments, and I will bring them up to him. So now there's no more further ado. Craig, how is it going?
Hey, it's good to see you, Cale. It's been a while. As I was listening to the intro, I was thinking back to like 2020 when we were all locked down and I was running a chainsaw on my
Oh
back
yeah.
deck and we were doing that webinar together.
Mm-hmm.
Totally cobbled together. It's amazing how far things have come in what now, 5 or
That
6 years, eh?
Yeah, I mean that is, yes, that's also, it was still a great webinar. It was all cobbled together on
Yeah.
my side, but you had everything set up, showing felling techniques and everything. So yeah, I mean yeah, anybody listening, watching right now, go check out that webinar on felling techniques. That was a really good one.
That was
But
fun
yeah,
to do.
that was quite a time, huh?
Well, that was back in the day when it was my wife and I and a couple of friends working part-time out of our house. And here
Mm-hmm.
we are now. I'm sitting in my office with all this junk behind me. Um, and we now have 10 employees, 7 certified arborists in the field. We have a field supervisor,
Nice.
have an arborist consultant. My wife, Joanna, is co-owner of the business with me now. It's amazing how time flies. And it's kind of a good lead into what we're going to talk about, that there are so many things that just are going to happen. They're
Mm-hmm.
going to happen in the life of a business, in the life of an arborist. Um, this idea of zero incidents, this is sort of my bone to pick. If I might as well start there. You've known me long enough. But my bone to pick is this idea that we're going to have so much training and so much attention to safety that we will have zero incidents. Unfortunately, it's crazy. It's nonsense. There's just no way to prevent everything. But the question is, what can we do? What can we do to minimize the frequency, minimize the likelihood, minimize the consequences and the costs of incidents when they happen? And training is a big part of that, and we'll get back to it. But we have to, whether we are working arborists in the field, we are managers, we are business owners, we have to act as if something is going to happen rather than hoping that it won't. And that's sort of where this comes from, this idea of never waste a crisis. Making the most out of the really bad things that happen. Making the most out of these learning experiences and saying, okay, that sucked. What can we do differently or better to help prevent it or to minimize the impacts, costs, consequences when, or God forbid, if it does happen again? So that's the origin of this, and I'm really excited to share it. Thank you to you and to Nick and to TreeStuff for the opportunity to be here. You guys have been a wonderful support of us, and I love doing these. I've had the opportunity to share this subject with arborists at our PNW chapter. I think I shared it with a group at Expo maybe a couple of years ago, but many people haven't seen this. And the long and the short of it is we had a climber fall. We had a climber fall out of a tree and be severely injured. And the worst part of all of it is I don't know about the worst part. Let me rephrase that. It happened at the worst time, which was I was out of the country. Where was I? I was in Malmo, Sweden at the ISA International Conference right after the ITCC, the international competition. I'm sitting in a hotel room with Alex Laver, bunking up with him, who's a former UK Ireland chapter president. And he and I are, BSing as you do at the end of an event. It's about 8 o'clock at night and my phone rings. And my wife, Joanna, who's there in the picture in the front row, she called me and said, hey, so we just had something terrible happen. What do you mean? She said, one of our staff just fell. Oh, God. And so here's a quick little sidebar. What happened and what we learned from it is so important to share, but I want to be sure that I share it in a way that is respectful of the person it happened to, the injured climber, who has completely returned to work. He's now moved on to another part of the country. But I'm going to work very, very hard not to use his name out of respect to him. So if I slip, I apologize, but I will do my very best. But this idea that a climber would fall and be severely injured at my company, at our company, really? Really? Holy crap. We're a family-owned business, so things that happen at work really impact our family, right? Business and family finance is closely intertwined here, right? We've now got 7 in this, field arborists. We only had 2 back then. They were both certified arborists. We really cared about doing the right things and doing them well. I've been training for a long time. I thought pretty highly of our company. And holy smoke, this happened. And it really challenged everything I believed. It challenged what I believed about myself. It challenged what I believed about my company. It challenged my trust in our staff. And that's the crisis part of it. It really was a crisis of identity and a crisis of confidence. And we really struggled to come to terms with that. And this presentation shares what happened, but it also shared what we learned from it. And that's the more important part. So let's spend a few minutes and let's go through what happened. And Cale, when we get to the end of what happened, let's pause and answer any questions that come up. It'll be a good moment before we transition into kind of the meat of this, which is what did we learn and what do we now do differently? But here's the big picture of what happened. So back in September of 22, this is a normal work day. This picture is literally the tree. And the red circle is where the climber was when he fell. He fell approximately 25 feet. He narrowly missed a wooden picket fence, landed in the landscape. The end result of this was an OSHA investigation, a state level OSHA investigation. And we'll get more into that. But we really struggled with how and why did it happen? What do you mean somebody fell? What does this say about us? And how do we prevent it happening again? So in the tree, and on the left there, you can see the pictures are real. These pictures are, in the sense that this is actually the tree. That's where the climber fell. And that in the lower left with the glove next to it is the piece that he was tied into and broke. And before we jump up on our high horse and say this is crazy, just realize this happened to a certified arborist with 7 years of experience who had 15 years in the green industry. So this was no spring chicken. This wasn't a greenhorn. This is somebody who made a mistake, right? Both of my team on the job are certified arborists. They'd completed their JHA, their job hazard assessment. They'd identified that there was obvious deadwood and insect damage. This is a Betula pendula, a European white birch. There's lots of them in Seattle. Lots of them are like this with large deadwood. We knew it ahead of time. It was on the work order. And there was a note about being careful with tie-in points. The climber had set a line from the ground, moved up to it, and was advancing his tie-in point, and identified what he thought of was a nest in the center of the tree. Now remember, this is September. Probably nothing going on in that nest, but this was a very sensitive person who didn't want to disturb wildlife habitat. And he was in an attempt to avoid that nest. Unfortunately, he made the decision to tie into a 5-inch diameter dead top. And if you have any experience with Betula pendula, European white birch, when it's dead, after a year or two, it gets really punky. It doesn't get hard, it gets soft. And it breaks very, very easily. And as he was transitioning to this, it broke under his body weight. He fell 25 feet. And if he had hit that fence, this was either a permanent life-altering injury or a fatality. And he was, I would guess, 18 to 24 inches from impacting that fence. That's how close this was to being catastrophic. At this point, it was just bad. And so that's what happened in the tree. Let's look at it from what happened on the ground. So his colleague, another certified arborist, was there on the job. And as the climber was setting his line and getting ready in the tree, the other arborist was around the corner of the house doing a little shrub pruning. I think it was clearance from the building. You know, the kind of thing that you just knock out while the climber's getting ready, and then you come help with the groundwork. So the fall was not witnessed. What was described as he heard a thump and maybe saw something out of his corner of his eye, came around the corner, and the climber had gotten himself up without assistance, and he had moved to the front of the house and was sitting on the porch. And nobody really knew what happened. He was stunned. He was startled. They were talking about it. And the climber mentioned that his back was sore. He had some back pain. So they called the office to report it as an injury. And they were driven to urgent care to get checked out in a company vehicle. Urgent care then, because of the back injury, put him on a backboard, called 911. Fire department showed up, put him in an ambulance, drove him to the hospital. It sounds backwards, but we'll come back to that. But an unwitnessed injury, uncertainty about what happened, led to some decisions that in retrospect we might do differently. So what this led to was an investigation. A reportable incident, according to OSHA, is any incident that results in hospitalization or a fatality. A reportable incident. That's a really important word. When these happen, you have a time frame in which it must be reported. I believe a fatality must be reported within, I think it is 8 hours. And a reportable injury hospitalization must be reported to OSHA, or in our case, you might hear me say LNI, stands for the Department of Labor and Industries, which is our Washington state level OSHA. So we have our own like sub OSHA state level group. If your state doesn't have that, then you are under the jurisdiction of federal OSHA. You'll sometimes hear people say, oh, we're not an OSHA state. It's not that you can't be a non-OSHA state. Everybody is under OSHA when you're within the US, Department of Occupational Safety and Health. But some states have their own sort of more stringent requirements, like Washington does. We have our own department. If your state doesn't have that, you're under federal OSHA. But the concept is the same. Because this was a hospitalization, it was a reportable injury. What that then triggers is a whole investigation process. And I flew back to the States that night. I was 8 hours ahead in Europe, so day, night, I don't know, it's confusing. I got back and I got a call the next day from an investigator who had been assigned to this case, which resulted in multiple phone calls, in-person interviews, document reviews, interviews with both people on the job, several conferences, and then a finding in the end. And so, spoiler alert, the end result of this was we received a citation for not having a fall protection work plan. But we didn't receive any financial penalty. So I guess that's a bright side. But what in the heck is a fall protection work plan? We had a JHA, a job hazard assessment, but we didn't have this fall protection work plan. I'd never heard of one. So here's the interesting thing, and this might apply to you. In Washington, state of Washington, tree work is considered a construction trade. So we are licensed as a construction company. So that when there's an incident, the investigator you get comes from construction. And he was a lovely person. He was thoughtful. He asked good questions, but he knew exactly zero about tree work. His first question was the climber attached to the tree? Wait, what? Is that where we're starting this conversation? Holy smoke. That was eye-opening to me. And the first thing he asked for is, do you have a job hazard assessment for this work site? Which we did. What I ended up doing is putting together this huge stack of paperwork, our job hazard assessment from that job and the last several months, every job, resumes for both climbers, our training records, a copy of the Z133, because he had no idea, right? Z133, minimum safety standards for arboriculture, our safe work practices book. It's orange and white. If you haven't seen it, get one. Articles that I'd written. Actually, Nick Bonner wrote a letter of reference for me, which I really appreciated, and several other people did, because I realized this guy I'm talking to, this investigator, is perfectly nice. He knows nothing about arboriculture, and he's pretty certain it's my fault what happened because I am the employer. And I needed to do everything I could to show him what was our company culture, and safety was important, and training was important, and here are the qualifications. And what happened was something dumb, something stupid, but it still happened. I'll tell you the lesson I learned, though, is that when there is an incident on the job site, the party assumed to be responsible is the employer. So for all of you out there who are business owners, if and when you have an incident, it is assumed to be your fault. That's just the way it works. OSHA or state level OSHA is designed to protect employees, not employers. And it creates a very stressful situation. So getting back to where we are, we had an investigation. It wasn't painful. He just asked for a lot of stuff. And he asked a bunch of questions that were totally out of the blue that I never expected. Was the climber attached to the tree? How was he attached to the tree? Was he trained? What was he using? So we went through a lot of these things. And then he interviewed both people on the job site separately from me. Internally, we had also done incident reports. And so I had copies of those that I provided. The end result, we got the citation, no financial penalty. Well, I should say, no fine associated with that citation. And we have since then created a fall protection work plan, and I'll show that to you in a little bit. It's not as complex as it sounds. So we went through this big process, and where did we end up? We ended up with the climber being out of work for 6 months. He had multiple fractures in his lower back. He had landed on his feet. Fortunately, he was super strong. Honestly, he's probably the strongest guy I've ever worked with. And that musculature really protected him. But he was out of work for 6 months. After 3 months, he was able to come back to start doing some light duty, but he wasn't able to go back to full duties, full capacity as a climbing arborist for 6 months. I was really pleased that he did come back to work, recovered entirely, worked with us for another year, and then for family reasons ended up moving on somewhere else. And really, I do wish him the best in what he is doing. This was a difficult situation for him and for all of us. So that's the what. There's some nuggets in there, but it's not the most important stuff. So let's just summarize just a little bit. Why did it happen? The climber broke out a tie-in point, overestimated tree strength, and failed to manage a hazard that everybody knew about. On the ground, our response wasn't as good as it could be. The fall was unwitnessed. We had a lack of information, and we didn't recognize a significant mechanism of injury. That's a really important term, MOI, mechanism of injury. It's what caused the injury. This was a fall. It could have been struck by a large log. It could have been crushed. It could have been a laceration. There's all kinds of different things that cause injuries. But the MOI, the question is how much energy was in the system and what's its potential to cause a severe life-threatening injury or fatality. So we didn't recognize and respond to this as a significant MOI. We'll come back to that. But the result being we didn't call 911 immediately. It didn't change the outcome, but it could have. So there's a key lesson in there. We'll come back. What compounded this? I think there was a high personal risk tolerance for the climber. Super strong, super active outdoors guy, good climber, maybe a little overconfident, and recognized being distracted by that nest. Our team's response, I think we had inadequate communication for a variety of reasons we just talked about. And maybe we didn't call 911 as soon as we should from the job site because we were worried about overreacting. Maybe it didn't seem that bad. And if you're a business owner, or if you can put yourself in my shoes or another business owner's shoes, nobody wants to see their company's truck and an ambulance or a fire engine next to it on the news. Just pause and think about that for a moment. The saying that good publicity, any publicity is good publicity, I'm not sure I believe. So I can imagine somebody saying, oh gosh, I don't want to call 911 if it's not necessary. Maybe there's cost. Maybe it makes the company look bad. But I think we have to be smarter about that. So there was a lesson in there. And I'm going to jump to one more slide here, and then let's pause for some questions. Why did this happen? What were the cultural factors? We're a small company. This is me and my wife, Joanna. I was still doing some work in the field. We were skilled climbers. We had a lot of trust in one another. I think we made some assumptions about the attentiveness we had to safety, about skill sets and assessment of trees. And I think in retrospect, we were kind of informal. So we've had to change a lot of things to protect ourselves, to protect the company, to protect our team. So there are a number of cultural factors that went into this. So I've been going for a while here. Let's pause. Cale, do you have any questions yet?
I don't have any questions from the chat yet. It is going to take maybe about 45 seconds a minute for them to catch up to where we are right now.
Sure.
I have questions.
Please, lay it on me.
And so I think the first one being as a baseline in your coming up as an arborist, what was your experience up to that point in being involved in incidents where there were injuries like this?
Oh, that's a great question. So when this occurred in 22, I had been an arborist for a decade. And I had never been on the job site when there was a significant injury. And honestly, I'm not sure I had even, worked at a company and in the time when I was there that there was a significant injury,
Hmm.
which is kind of interesting to think about. And I wonder how many people that's true for, it, and maybe quite a few. But that in 10 years, I'd never been significantly injured. I'd never seen anyone be significantly injured in this profession. Um, and I had not worked at a company where a coworker had been severely injured. Interestingly, I was a volunteer firefighter. I was a ski patroller. I was trained as an EMT. So I'd been involved in some very serious incidents, but as a responder, not as an injured party, bystander, coworker. Great
Interesting.
question. Yeah.
Interesting. And so because as after this, you've obviously done a lot of uh, compiling your experiences and learning from it. That's the whole idea of this talk. How long did it take you to realize that this was something that you needed to frame as a learning experience and
Oh,
kind of
great
look in
question.
on your own, do your own internal investigation?
Yeah, there's two answers to that. About 1 nanosecond is the first answer.
All right.
Um, the, oh my God, how did this happen? How did it happen to us? And how do we make sure this never happens again? Like that was the first thing that went through my mind as a business owner when the call came in. And I admit it because I wasn't there. I was so distant from it. I was literally across the ocean. So it wasn't, I didn't have a personal connection to it until I got back and I was able to meet with and see our team. It
Mm-hmm.
was very much at arm's length, but to be honest, I was very afraid about what it meant for the future of our company and my family.
Mm-hmm.
I just had this fear of catastrophic, injury and workers' compensation claims and massive premium hikes and financial ruin. I'm pleased to say it didn't turn out that way for many, many reasons, but it has been far more expensive than I ever imagined.
I get.
So to your answer, it took just a second to realize, like, holy crap, we got to learn from this. But I think the more full answer, Kale, is it took me about 2 years of processing this to really be able to clearly say, what did we learn from this and
Mm-hmm.
how have we implemented that? And that was when I was able to sit down and put together this presentation.
I think the next part of that, um, that I don't know if you're going to get into this a little bit more or not, is how much what did you think the repercussions would be before this of an incident, of an injury, or an accident in the workplace? As a business owner, what was your expectation of something
Yeah,
like this?
great question. My expectation turned out to be entirely the opposite of what actually happened. I had sort of nightmares of um, significant, call it upfront costs in some way. I'd never been through it before, so I didn't really understand. Interestingly, it cost us like nothing up front. And like in a horror movie where two people turn to each other and go, it's quiet. Yeah, too quiet. That's what I should have been thinking because all the costs came later. Because of having workers' compensation coverage, as every business does, that insurance, albeit here in Washington State, it's a state program we pay into rather than private, but it works the same way. That paid all the expenses up front. That paid the employee's time while he was injured. It paid all of the medical costs. But we're paying for it now. A year or so ago, a year and a half ago, when I finally got this presentation together, my math said up to that point it cost us about $30,000 in increased workers' compensation premiums. Through this calendar year, by the end of 26, it will actually have cost us $130,000 Now, there's a couple of things happening. I can't speak to how everybody's work comp works or functions or how premiums are calculated, but here in Washington State, we pay premiums based on hours worked. We pay roughly $7 or $8 per hour worked in the field. And what happened to us is our premiums went up because of this incident, and we were growing the company. When the incident occurred, it was myself and Joanna, like on that last slide, and 2 arborists in the field. I now have 7 arborists in the field. So we're paying a higher rate per hour for 3.5 times as many people. And it's sort of the perfect storm. If you had asked me how much do I think this will cost me in the long run, let's say within a month of when it happened, I don't know, I would have guessed 30,000, 50,000. But the idea that through this year it will cost us over 130,000, I would have never guessed. It's still mind-boggling to me. Now, for the sense of scale, this year our business is going to do close to $2 million in revenue. So, and it's not 130,000 in 1 year. It's over multiple years, right? This happened back in 22, and our premiums increased some each year. We haven't had any other major incidents. We've had the typical sliver or, a little laceration from my hands, all that kind of thing, but no other significant incidents. But we had 3 years of premium increases multiplied by more people that turned into this gigantic 6-digit number. That was pretty shocking to me.
That's wild. Phil Renaud has a good question here. I don't know if you're going
to. We're not taking questions from Phil Renaud. Hey, brother.
What was the staff fallout from the incident? Has it caused apprehension for them to work? Lingering fears, etc., from the staff?
I can only speak to what was shared with me and what I observed from the outside. I think it undermined trust. I know it undermined mine, and I think it undermined trust between the 2 arborists who were on site. In a silver lining kind of way, I think that the injured climber was out for an extended period, allowed some of that to pass. I think it would have been very different if one person had made a decision that had caused someone else to be injured, and the person who had made the decision or caused the action was back at work the next day. I don't know what that dynamic would have been. That would have been very, very hard. But I think this undermines some trust. It required a lot of time, honestly, to begin to process and to build trust again between people. But it immediately caused us to slow down, step back, and think about how do we do things. And what was interesting, because we were small, we had 2 arborists full-time in the field, plus me helping, and Joanna, I guess, helping a little bit too. But we ended up bringing in a variety of arborist friends of ours as contract climbers. And that was its own challenge of they're really good arborists, but they don't know how we work. They don't know what our processes are. So we had to do a lot of learning and a lot of sort of adapting and really emphasizing communication to get confident again. There were definitely, what would you call them, ripple effects from it. That's a great question. Thanks, Phil.
I want to stress here that you are a top of the line arborist and like very, very well renowned as a great trainer. And we, of course, expect you to do nothing but hire the best people and provide them with the best training. Is there something that you wish you had done to prepare yourself as an employer more? Coming from the arborist side, like you're the expert in the arborist side, when going into that ownership position, how would you go back and do that again? And how would you go about learning how to do that, knowing what you know now?
That's a great question. I think you're teeing me up for about the next 6 slides that I've got. So
Okay.
Let's do this. Can we hold that question
Of
just 1
course.
second? Do we have one more question we can answer before we get to yours?
It's all pretty much the same. Did the climber and groundy have comms?
Yes, they were on Cena. They were using Bluetooth at the time.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Yep. Great question. And we were on a little tiny lot, right? We were in Seattle. This property was probably like 5,000 square feet, not the house, the lot. So you couldn't be very far from anybody.
Oof.
We were on Bluetooth, but everything happened so quickly that it was unwitnessed. I think the two arborists were less than 30 feet apart, but one was around the corner of the house.
Yeah. And this was that he wasn't working. He didn't have his lanyard on. This was the tie-in point itself that broke. That's what it was?
It was the tie-in point, and I can't speak to exactly what happened because I wasn't the one in the tree. But my impression is he had set an initial tie-in point from the ground using a throw line. He had moved up to it, lanyarded in, advanced his tie-in point, and I don't know exactly what happened in terms of load testing or not. I don't want to misspeak here. I don't know exactly what happened. Lanyard was released, and as he began to move, it's my understanding that's when it broke.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, let's keep going. I'm interested.
All right. Sure. So this next section is all about what are our lessons learned, the action steps that we took. And that's why I said, Cale, your question was perfect. The one general comment I'm going to add before we get into this slide is it goes back to the beginning. 0 incidents is unattainable. It is a foolish standard. It's something wonderful to strive for, but it's just not possible. Somebody's going to twist an ankle, fall off a curb, have something unexpected happen in a tree. There will be incidents, and we have to prepare for them, not only try to prevent them. It's a little bit like preparing for aerial rescue, practicing emergency response. We practice just like we're going to play. We are ready for when it's going to happen, not hoping that it won't. So putting that into some specifics, I've got probably 6 or 7 really important takeaways or lessons learned for us. One is training, and documentation. We have to be very clear in how we do things. The Z133, and I probably have one in my office. I know we've got one in the library. I don't have one readily available, but the Z133 is the minimum safety standard for arboriculture, but it doesn't say how to do everything. It's the minimum. And we at each company need to define how do we do our work properly and safely. We got to define our procedures, and we need to train every aspect of the job. Whether it's pre-climb inspection, tie-in points, how do we respond to emergency? When do we call 911? We need first aid CPR training, right? Because this could have been so much worse if he had landed on that fence. We got lucky that it wasn't worse. But we need to train every bit of how we do. And the funny thing is, it's easy to say that's impossible, I'll never get there, so why should I try? It's almost impossible, I can agree with. And you may never get there, I can also agree with, but we have to try. Start with the big things. We built out a thing we call a task book. I picked up that term from somebody else. That's, I don't know, it's 30 or 40 pages, sort of step-by-step skills within a whole variety of different areas, whether it's particular knots or how to set up a porta wrap or how to install a GRCS or how do we communicate around pre-climb inspection? How do we do a job hazard assessment? We're actually quite clear on those. And that, call it like a sign-off form, where it's not every step of tying a bowline, but I want to know that every team member can tie a bowline. I don't want to assume, I want to know. And it's my field supervisor's job to make sure he confirms that and to sign them off in their task book. It seems crazy. It seems Boy Scouts, Cub Scouts, whatever you want to call it. But just because you tell me you know how to tie a bowline doesn't mean you do. And if it turns out that somebody taught you wrong, and you tie it wrong over and over and over, sometime it's going to fail, and potentially something's going to get broken or somebody's going to get hurt. And I'll share the secret with you. The employee who screws up pays for nothing. Yes, if they're injured, there's absolutely a personal cost. But the financial responsibility when something goes wrong is borne exclusively by the business owner. I guess with the exception of if it puts the company out of business, then everybody pays for it. But getting back to that simple example of making sure we all tie a bowline properly, it could be something that simple that we assume someone knows how to do and they do it wrong over and over and over. And finally, it bites them right in the ass at a critical moment and everybody loses. And it's suddenly very expensive. It's an injury, or it's buying a new deck, or it's a new skylight, or whatever it might be. So we
I
have to
want
be
to
really detailed. Yeah.
I want to just jump in here. You're talking about this, can everyone tie a bowline? Is not that crazy coming from other fields. I am in the Air Force maintenance field, and that's something that is very much a part of that. There is that, we need to know if people know how to use a wrench, and they have to be signed off that they've been trained on that. And I think that's a really important part that I hope that everyone else is doing. It's not going for that bare minimum, but also just kind of making sure that everyone is actually on the same level there. So I'm very glad that you talked about that. I think that's extremely
Yeah.
important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And thank you for the good example. And it feels kind of stupid, right? I mean, Kaylee, I imagine you would say the same thing. Like, do we really have to make sure everybody can use a wrench? Do we make sure everybody can tie a bowline? Turns out we do.
I would say that, except I know 100% we do need to make sure everyone knows how to how to turn a wrench correctly, because some of them don't. Yeah.
Well, let's use the example from this incident. Looking back, the idea of tying into a 5-inch dead top in a birch with bronze birch board damage is 100% bonkers. Not nobody does that, but yet it happened. And there's lots of things that go into it beyond just the hard skills. And we're going to come back to that a little bit more. And so we have to recognize that we are all human, and training and documenting that training, because if you didn't write it down, it didn't happen. But documenting the training, who was there, what did you train on, when did you do it, is the first and minimum that we have to do toward being competent and being safe on the job site. And this applies to all levels of experience. We have so many friends at such a high level. I've had Lawrence Schultz come work with us. Lawrence is wonderful, or Johnny Corthus, or Chad Bry, or a whole bunch of people, or names many of you probably recognize. I want to know what they know. I want to be sure that we are doing things the same way, and we don't make assumptions and they don't make assumptions that lead to something getting damaged or someone getting hurt. So this applies to all levels of experience. No, I didn't ask Lawrence if he knew how to tie a bowline, though. Another thing that was extremely important for us, and I am grateful to say we had, is a job hazard assessment. When I had the chance to do this presentation in person, I asked for a show of hands around the room. And how many of you work at a company where you regularly complete job hazard assessments? And consistently, it's about 10% of the room that say yes. That's not shocking, though. It's really, really unfortunate, but it's not shocking, because my company is the first company where I've ever worked where we do them consistently. And the only reason I do is because I learned the importance of them in training and site safety roles that I was doing prior to starting this company. And it is still sometimes hard for me, talking with the team, to make sure that they are taking the time, because they want to get the job done. They want to be great arborists. They want to be efficient. They want to show me they know what they're doing and they can get it done quickly. What I really need them to do, and we need to happen at all of our companies, is that we start slow and think clearly when we get on the job site. We need to look at site hazards, tree hazards. We need to talk about, define, and implement our mitigation steps, whether that is cones or 2 sheets of plywood over a window well, or it is moving the glass, artwork under the tree, or it's identifying that single phase primary that's almost invisible behind the tree in the backyard. And we need to be prepared for emergency response. The paperwork is not the point. It is the documentation of doing the right thing. It's the documentation of being thorough in preparing ourselves, preparing our site, mitigating hazards, communicating clearly to keep everyone as safe as we possibly can in this high hazard profession. It's really important that that JHA is signed by everyone on the job site, and it goes back to the office with paperwork, and it is kept in company records. We have binder after binder, one for every year of all of our JHAs. I say all. I'm sure we're missing one. But we do it for every single job. And remember what I shared with you. What's the first piece of paperwork that investigator asked for? He asked for our JHA. And I'm so grateful that we had it. Because if we didn't, we were all of a sudden talking about other citations and fines that go along with that. So documentation, not just of training, but job hazard assessment and mitigation. And it's important that this doesn't get pencil whipped. And I'll give you a quick example. We used to have it where all of our staff's names were listed on the bottom, and they could just put their initials next to it. And what I learned is they were trying to save time, which I appreciate the thought, and they were doing it over CINA, over Bluetooth, and somebody was initialing for everybody. So we stopped that. It's just blank lines. And each person signs that they were part of the walk around and job briefing. They are aware of the hazards and the mitigation, and that they accept and understand what is being done to mitigate those hazards. That's really important. You can't pencil whip this document because somebody's going to miss it, and all of a sudden they're not going to be aware there's a primary behind the maple in the back and something catastrophic is going to happen. Maybe not this year, but sometime. And then save those records, because God forbid, when something goes wrong, you're going to need them. Speaking of that, let's see if I set this up properly. So here's page 1 of our JHA. So it starts at the top. Whoa, let's see if we can only see page 1. Page 1 here. Who did the form, the date, the site address, and where you are on the property, for instance. We work at some larger sites. Hey, we're around the back behind the gymnasium at the school, or whatever it is. Where is our nearest urgent care? Do we have our phone, first aid kit, and fire extinguisher? And then what are the key roles on the job? Who's handling emergency communications? Who's going to be primary for first aid? Who are the 2 climbers on the job, if we have 2? And we also do a pre-climb gear inspection every time. And it's not 15 minutes, but like 2 minutes, have somebody else do a quick look at your harness, check your climbing system, do a quick look through your rope. Once in a while, we catch something and go, whoa, dude, did you know? And there's still time to fix it before somebody's up in the tree. Below that, we go through site hazards and level of hazard, and then mitigation steps that were taken. Underneath, we have a reminder, work above 10 feet requires fall protection. See the back. We'll come back to that in a moment. And then different types of work, ground operations, tree access, pruning, removal. And it's a reminder to talk about the hazards associated with those kinds of work. Tree removal having different hazards than ground operations. Any specific notes about safety or training objectives. And then we have an arborist in charge. We now call it a truck lead. That they are the person who is responsible for the quality of that walkthrough and that hazard assessment. And then underneath, acknowledgement, signatures by each person on the job. And early on, we talked about this fall protection work plan concept. So I'll show you what we added. Imagine now we're flipping the page over, and on the back of our job hazard assessment, first we have a variety of bullets, key safety standards for working aloft. What we were required to have in this work plan is a I'm going to call it a summary of safety standards so that there is no confusion. And these are bits that we sort of excerpted out of the Z133. And then underneath it, at least for 2 trees, and we could use more pages for others, is information, hazard information about each specific tree that will be climbed. What is its condition, species, location, tie-in points, risk factors? Is there a rigging plan? And so at the bottom, then a signature. So this is now the back side of our job hazard assessment. If you would like this job hazard assessment, it is yours. This QR code takes you to our website. You put in your email, we send it to you. I'm not going to spam you. It's just the easiest way to deliver this. So if you click on this QR, you go to our website, you put in your email, it'll ask you what document you want. Just say JHA template. It'll send you an email with a link to download it. Please take it, use it, share it with the owner of your company if you're not the owner. Modify it, make it better. And if you do, send me an email. Contact me, arborist@tree133.com. Send me what you did with it. Show me how you made it better, because I would love to make this the best document that we can, all working together.
You can also contact media@treestuff.com, and we can get you in touch with Craig. We can get you the JHA and everything there.
Awesome.
If that's easier.
Thank you, Jeff.
Of course.
I appreciate it.
Of course.
All right. So paperwork. It seems like a lot, but I tell you the lesson learned. 1, documentation reminds us to do what we know we should do. And 2, it covers our backsides when something goes wrong. I didn't say if, but when something goes wrong, you're going to be real glad that you have these to show that if you're on the job, that you did it properly. And if you are not on the job, you're the manager or owner, that your team did it properly. It's really, really important, because if you don't have this, you have a massive problem. All right, so let's get into something specific that we added to our process as a result of this incident. We now use what we call consensus tie-in points. Consensus is an interesting word. Consensus means no objections. Not that everyone necessarily agrees that's the one tie-in point that they would use, but that after looking at the tree together, at least 2 people, I don't care if it's the most senior guy and Johnny Greenhorn, but at least 2 people looking at the tree, talking it through and saying, yes, that's a reasonable tie-in. Is that the last tie-in you're going to use? It's the only tie-in you're going to use? No, but it's a reasonable place to start going up the tree. For example, if we were to apply this to the birch tree where the incident happened, tying in the main union, certainly reasonable. There are probably other tie-ins above that that couldn't be seen from the ground. It was pretty dense. So maybe that's the conversation. Hey, start from the ground, probably the best choice. Let's get a throw line into that main union. There's some laterals to stand on, get lanyarded in, and then do an aerial inspection and figure out where you're going to tie in. That might be the outcome of this discussion. But the point is to have the conversation before somebody goes in the tree. Because it's one thing to look at it and go, oh yeah, I'm kind of going to do something like that. And it's another thing to have to say out loud to somebody, I think my plan is to set a throw line at that main union, and then I'm going to reevaluate. In this birch, I want to tie into something that's live. I want it to be at least X diameter, and have that conversation, because maybe somebody goes, no way I'm tying into that diameter. I'd want it bigger. Or somebody goes, no, in this tree, if it's healthy, I'm okay with a little smaller, but I'll probably use a second tie-in. All of a sudden, we have a really good dialogue going to reach a consensus. No objections. That's the idea. It's just an improvement on or an extension of that pre-climb inspection. So from a simple perspective, one takeaway, if you did one thing besides having a JHA, apply consensus tie-in points on your job sites. So we talked about MOI earlier, mechanism of injury. We should have called 911 earlier on this job. That's been a big lesson for me. We need to get beyond that perception of overreacting or what if we're on the news, and we need to consider the worst possible outcome. Because it's probably happened to you. I know it's happened to me. I tripped, I twisted my ankle, I did something, and somebody goes, "Are you all right, dude?" And I go, yeah, I'm fine. The same thing can happen with very severe injuries. The person may downplay the severity either because they're not aware of it, right? They are totally jazzed on adrenaline, or because they don't want to be perceived as weak. So we need to look at it based on mechanism of injury. Is there a potential for a severe life-threatening injury or death? That would be falls greater than 6 feet, struck-bys to the head, torso, or upper leg. I guess upper arm would apply in there as well. Anywhere where we have major blood vessels, or a penetrating injury to the head, torso, upper leg. Again, upper arm could fit there as well. Interestingly, amputation of a finger, a handsaw cut to the forearm, a broken ankle, those are going to hurt a whole hell of a lot, and they're bad, but it's not a life-threatening injury. It would not be considered a significant MOI. There was an incident that happened. I'm not going to give you any details. I wasn't involved. There was an incident that happened on a very large job. A large piece of wood swung and struck a ground worker who was standing against the truck, sort of almost crushed him between the log and the truck. The log was moved. He got up and he said, "Yeah, I'm okay." He died that night. It's really, really serious what we do. And when there is a significant mechanism of injury, we need to call 911 because we are not doctors. We are not paramedics. We don't have x-ray vision. We need a medical professional in a hospital to tell us we're okay if there's a significant mechanism of injury. It's not enough to say, yeah, I'll be fine. Just call, because it could be worse than you realize. And remember that any movement following an injury could make it worse, and that person's condition could deteriorate. So anytime there's a significant mechanism, call 911, call them right away. Worst case, they get there and go, "Nope, he's okay." Maybe they take him to the hospital, and he's okay there. Compared to what it could be, those are perfectly good outcomes. So that's that MOI subject. There might be a CEU question on that or two. Thinking about safety on the job site, I think we need to also, as a profession, think carefully about our risk tolerance. Anytime we can, let's increase the margin of safety. Let's give us room where we don't have to be perfect and we're still going to be safe. One of the ways we do that is adding time at the sales process, adding dollars literally into the quote to allow time for good site preparation, for risk mitigation, for hazard avoidance. Adding time for safety is really important. And then sometimes there are just jobs that we're going to decide we don't need to do. I worked for a guy in Denver named Court Sherwood, who's become a really good friend of mine. Many of you may know him. Court said something great to me. He said, Craig, there is a way to do any tree. He said, it may not be today, and it may not be by you, but there's a way to get it done. That was really helpful for me. I started working for Court when I was maybe 2 years into this profession. And the idea that, you know what, I don't have the answer to this tree. I don't have the equipment that I need. I don't have the people. I don't have the skill. I don't have the whatever. It gave me permission to make that smart decision and step back, ask for help, wait and come back another day. If we need a crane, we need a crane. And it took me a long time to accept that. And it still can be uncomfortable, right? If we price a job to do it as a climbing removal and the crew gets there, actually, heck, we just had one today to remove an old decayed snag that was leaning. Didn't look like it was unstable, but when they got there, they found out that they could move it in the ground. They had to totally change their work plan. That's okay. Because even if we had to bring in the crane, let's say it cost us $5,000 to bring a crane in to remove that snag that we thought we were going to do for $2,000. The savings by preventing a catastrophic incident Imagine somebody had gone up that snag and had failed with them in it, and now they're attached to 4,000 pounds of wood moving through the air. The costs of that would be catastrophic. And every one of us would pay 5,000 and more to take back that choice, to be able to do it again. And so we just need to be smart about how we approach the work that we do and what we choose to do, what we choose not to do. Safety begins at the sales appointment. It's something I've come to believe. When I go out to look at a tree, or one of my other sales arborists does, we are looking at it from a safety perspective, not just a pruning or removal or pricing or client perspective. Safety begins with sales. And in the end, when the field team gets there to do the work, there's nothing more to win. We've already been hired. All we have to do is complete what we promised to do. We've got everything to lose. It's easy to, in one momentary lapse of reason, to use the Pink Floyd reference, to make a dumb choice with costs that may be more than just money. There are some things in life that money can't fix. We have to be really smart to make sure those don't happen. Do everything we can every day. Part of that is cultural. One of the takeaways from me from this experience is the need for greater, stronger relationships between not only, or I should say, not only among the field team, but between me and admin and sales and the field team, among all of us, because we all depend on one another to get work done safely, efficiently, productively, profitably. Everyone is accountable, and we're responsible to one another. We need to every day be making an investment in building relationships, because we are counting on one another to make smart choices and to have everyone's best interest in mind. One of the ways that we build responsibility is we debrief every job. Now, that may sound crazy, but here's how we do it. Down in our shop, which is downstairs from our office, we've got a whiteboard. It's got everybody's name down the left side, and it has 3 columns. One says win, one says learn, and one's got a question mark. And this model came from a friend of mine who was studying jujitsu, and his instructor, instructor, had said to him, Blake, my friend, either you're winning or you're learning. And so each day our team comes in, and not everybody fills something in, but is there something that went really well on the job that you want to acknowledge as a win for the team? Is there something that maybe didn't go well that we solved or we didn't know how to solve, that we had a little bit of a learning experience? That goes in the learn column. And then the question mark is something that's unresolved, something that we wondered about, something that came up that needs some discussion. So wins and learns. We do that at the end of the day. We capture that information. And then in the morning, before we hand out paperwork, we go through and talk about what were our wins and learns, how did each job go, and we do it quickly. Our morning meeting lasts 20 minutes every day, all field staff, and that is debriefing jobs, handing out paperwork, answering questions, and it all gets done in 20 minutes with 7 people in the room. It works pretty good. We have learned to talk openly about near misses. It is something that we, I would say, continue to put effort into, being open with one another about when things don't go the way we planned, when something was a close call. That is a skill, and I think that skill, it's kind of like a muscle, right? That it needs to continue to be trained. It doesn't happen on its own. It will weaken over time if it's not used. So talking about near miss is an important point or part of that debrief. And then lastly in here, around responsibility, we have all met or worked with people who don't care about these things, who are out for themselves, that for whatever is going on in their life are unable to see beyond what is right in front of them and cannot consider the good of the people around them. And it's sad. We've all maybe been in those in little ways where we've been that guy. Hopefully we've come out of it pretty quickly. We've got to be real careful that we avoid those people, or that we bring it to their attention, maybe have a little intervention and get it corrected. But you need people on your team, just as I need people on mine, who care about the people around them and are working for the good of others, not just the good of themselves. So lastly, I want to share with you some personal lessons that I took away from this as the business owner and as an arborist, as a trainer. One, that I take responsibility for what happened. It's my company. What's good and what's bad in the end comes back to me. I can't blame anyone else. Certainly there are contributing factors, but it happened on my watch. And as we've talked about, incidents are going to happen. It's a when, not an if. But by being really diligent in our training, by looking for hazards, by managing them, by communicating well, by being attentive and thoughtful and caring about one another, using consensus tie-in points, or whatever the skill may be, we can minimize the frequency, severity, and consequences of those incidents. It's not enough to just trust. We can't make assumptions. We need to be active in our risk management, actively training, actively assessing skills, because good process protects everyone. And in the end, if you're somebody making hiring decisions, or you have a input on that and you're interviewing somebody, find people with strong character, people with empathy for one another, people who are open communicators. Skills can be taught, character cannot. So those were some personal lessons for me. So wrapping it all up, we're just about right on time. A couple of big takeaways that I hope are helpful to you and you will activate, you will implement in your own experience, whether you're a business owner or at the company where you work. You got to be prepared because incidents will happen. Train, 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 and document. Remember your JHA on every job and save that paperwork. Try using consensus tie-in points. They've been a huge help for us. Remember, mechanism of injury, the potential for severe injury. Just because you haven't seen it, just because you don't see the signs and symptoms, there may be internal injuries, there may be things you haven't noticed. So if there's a significant MOI, call 911. Don't wait. Cultivate responsibility among the whole team. Hire for character. And whether you're the business owner or not, it doesn't matter. We all need to take ownership for safety and ownership for what happens and recognize our role in success or failure. So we're not perfect. We're just human. We do the best we can and we learn from it. And I appreciate you spending some time with us today. And I genuinely hope this is helpful. Here's my email. I know Kale's got it. Come check us out online at tree133.com. You had that QR code. Would love to, oh, hey, here's the QR code again. Would love to share that JHA with you. And I wish you the best, and I hope to meet you in person, either at maybe at Expo, maybe at a TreeStuff event, maybe here in the Pacific Northwest if you're in our neck of the woods. That's what I got for you today.
Great. Thank you, Craig. Do you have time for some questions?
I do, my friend.
Perfect. I've got some questions. I've got a couple questions here from the chat as well. I know that, well, let's start with this one. When you sat down to create your JHA, what was your process of going through and deciding what to put on there and how it was going to work? How did that come together to get to the point of where you are right now?
Yeah, great question. That JHA is the product of seeing a lot of documentation from other companies for big projects where I was a safety supervisor, sometimes for small companies, sometimes from doing training, and a company had the document that they were using. And I didn't really like any of them. Some of them were super long and multiple pages and just minutia questions that it was just time consuming and became meaningless. And others were totally inadequate because there was so little. And this is sort of the jumbling them all together, throwing out what we didn't like, adding bits over, year after year. And it's an evolving document that combines kind of the best of what I have found in other places. Not to say there aren't better pieces out there, and I'm wide open to changing it if we can make it better. I'd love any suggestions.
And I think that's an important part of it, is that it's evolving. Uh, is great. We talked a little bit at some point in time in the past about how you go about hiring people, and you kind of hit on that. Can you explain a little bit more about what you're looking for when you're hiring, and how it's a little bit different than maybe it was when you started out?
Yeah, great question. Uh, there's another presentation I've done called How to Build $1 Million Business Without Answering the Phone. Um, Not giving away all the bits in there, but one concept in there is about hiring quality people and what I call hiring from the top. That if you're a small company or you're looking to grow, hire skilled people first. For us, our company is all climbers. Everybody in the field is a climber and a certified arborist. That's the minimum to be part of our team because of the kind of work we do and sort of our brand and where we are in the market. But I think the concept applies regardless of what your market position is, whether you're hiring certified arborists exclusively or not. I don't think it really matters. Take whatever the minimum skill set is and focus on the character of the person with those skills. And that's the decision making factor. We have people contact us, I'll say occasionally, it's not all the time, looking for a job. And yes, they have to meet the minimum skill requirements. But what I want to know is, what are they all about as a person? What do they want out of their employment experience? Are they just looking for a paycheck and go home? Is that all they care about? Or are they looking to be part of something, to be part of a team, to work with good people, to learn, to have growth opportunities? Those are the character traits that we have found lead to really great team members.
Um, sort of on that note, there, have you had to let someone go because they weren't a good fit?
I have. I have. And that was a hard decision. And it came from the realization that the some very subtle behaviors that I wasn't seeing as much in the office, but were happening in the field, were they were undermining the rest of the team. And as much as we needed, for lack of a better term, the bodies, right? We had the work, wanted to get it done to meet our revenue goals, whatever it might be, that we were better off without that person than we were with them. And it was a hard decision, but I would do it over again, and I would do it much
Mm-hmm.
sooner in retrospect. I mean, there's a saying, slow to hire, quick to fire. I think there's a lot of truth to that, without being cavalier, right? Without being flippant and off the cuff. I think our guts tell us when something is not right, and we need to dig into that and then take action to correct it.
So you've talked a lot about the impacts on this, the things that you have done uh, to that are very concrete, um, things that you have developed in order to make this not happen and to be more prepared for the next time. Zhang George has a question. After the fall, did you apply any PR techniques to save the reputation of the business internally or externally?
Ooh, great question. The simple answer is no, um, but I did worry about it a lot. Uh, what I guess maybe there's a little yes to the answer, which is we did have a discussion with our team, which was very small at the time, but we agreed that we were not going to talk about the incident um, in public settings until it was fully resolved and the employee was back to work. We didn't want to be in any way inadvertently speaking negatively of that employee, giving people inaccurate information, particularly in light of an ongoing investigation, but also out of respect for our injured team member. We just wanted to be very careful to avoid those possibilities.
I'm gonna actually switch around the next question here, because the next question that I have is, what's your secret to turn things around in this crisis? I think you've done a. I have my ideas on what your secret is and why you're so successful on this. What is the opposite of that? What can you see from an incident like this that would be the worst thing that you could do in this situation as an employer?
Ooh, that's a really excellent question. It was very tempting to blame the employee. I'm not going to say that the climber didn't have a significant responsibility, but he didn't have a sole responsibility. And as an employer, as a leader, let's say that, right? Whether I'm a foreman or a truck lead or a field supervisor or a branch manager or a company owner, if something goes wrong and my first response and the only thing I'm willing to do is point my finger and say, it was your fault, I'm going to miss valuable learning opportunities. I'm going to waste the crisis, if we use the name, right? Learning
Nice.
from these things that happened. Yeah, I thought that was good, wasn't it? Learning from these and saying, what did I contribute? What did I do or not do that may have led to this, that may have created the underlying conditions where something could happen, right? And if we use a tree analogy, right? The cultural conditions, the site and growing conditions that lead to a healthy or unhealthy tree, they're not the tree's fault. The tree was planted in those conditions. So we have to think about, figuratively, right? Taking the analogy too far, I suspect, but we have to think about the soil and water and fertilizer and mulch that are our company cultures. And what is it that we're doing or not doing? What can we learn? How did we, as a leader, contribute to, through errors of commission or omission, right? What did we do or not do that may have contributed to either the occurrence or severity of an incident? That's not a comfortable thought process, right? Because it's much easier to blame someone else and say, it was your fault, you did something stupid. But I can see in retrospect that we were not as good as we thought we were. And we are a lot better now. And we continue to strive to be as good as we can be, to live up to our own expectations for ourselves.
I think that's what I would say is the thing that makes you so successful in this, is that openness and that striving to get better. So I think if there's anything that that everyone should take from this, is to go at it like that. Always look to find something that you can learn out of this. So Craig, thank you very much for doing this with us, taking your time. Everyone who is watching, the link to the CEU quiz is in the comments. If you take that right now, you can get 2 free CEUs if you pass, and you have to have been paying attention and taking notes. We will get those updated soon. You can contact Craig at arborist@tree133.com, and you can find everything about him, as well as how to contact him further at that address, tree133.com. Craig, thank you so much once again for doing this. Any last words before we get out of here?
I just want to say thank you to you, my friend. These are really fun to do. I appreciate the opportunity. I appreciate everybody can we say being here, I guess, virtually.
Yeah.
Thanks for the great questions. I genuinely hope this information has value to you, and that you will use it to elevate yourselves, elevate your company, and just be the best arborist that you can. And I hope to see you in person sometime.
Great. All right. Well, thank you, and have a nice rest of your day, everybody.
Cheers.
Bye.
See you all. Thanks.